Hey everybody, welcome back to When Harry Met Board Games. Today we're going to be teaching you how to play Marvel United. This is a cooperative Marvel theme game where players take on the role of Marvel heroes or sometimes anti-heroes, even villains, all teaming up together to defeat the main bad guy. And there are multiple bad guys to play with. For the purposes of this tutorial video, I'll be using one of the bad guys from the base game, and all the content in this tutorial will be from the base game. So first we're going to start with setup. We have this board right here, which is referred to as the mission guide, and we'll be using this right here to place the different missions that heroes will be trying to accomplish throughout the course of the game. And there are three possible missions. We have this clear threats mission, this rescue civilians mission, this defeat thugs mission. As you can see, each of these mission cards have a certain amount of slots. Once all of these slots are filled, these missions are completed and you will remove them from the game. In order to win the game, players need to complete at least 2 out of these 3 missions. They could complete all 3 if they wish, but they will not be able to win the mission or win the game if they don't complete at least 2 of these missions. We're also going to select a villain, and the rulebook recommends that for your first game you play Red Skull, who, although he is probably more challenging than all the other villains in the core set in the base game, he's also more straightforward than the other villains in the base game, so that's probably why they recommend him to be the starting villain. So let's see the villain dashboard. We're going to grab the villain dashboard for the main villain. We're going to grab their miniature piece. Remember, this is a miniatures game here. We're also going to grab their master plan deck, which consists of 12 cards. And we're going to grab their threat deck, which consists of 6 cards. Now, the villain dashboard here has lots of information, including the health, the starting health for the villain. So in this case, we have Red Skull here, who, according to the player count, is going to have a specific amount of health assigned to him. So we are going to simulate a 3-player game. So he's going to need 8 of these health tokens, and we're just going to place them right here. Now that we've done that, we are going to look at the rest of the villain dashboard. First of all, each villain has a BAM effect. That is a particular action that is triggered throughout the course of the game whenever one of the master plan cards has this logo, this icon with the word BAM in it. You will trigger the main villain's BAM effect, not to mention any other bad guys who might be in the city. You would trigger their BAM effects as well. There are also overflow effects for each villain. We'll explain those more shortly. And sometimes, not always, the villains will have a track that will advance and progress throughout the course of the game. If they do have a track, you take this blue little cube, as is the case with Red Skull, and you place it on the 0 spot in that track. Usually, these tracks indicate that once the cube advances all the way to the end of the track, and they have varying lengths as far as they're concerned, once this cube makes it to the end of the track, that's an additional way in which the heroes can lose the game. This is referred to as the villain's villainous plot. However, there are some standard ways of losing the game, such as having the master plan deck run out or having the heroes not be able to draw new cards and run through all of their cards as well. Now, after you've set up the villain dashboard, the next thing you would do is you would set up the location. There will always be 6 locations in every game. And these are the places that the heroes and the villains will be moving through. And you set up these 6 locations around the mission guide and the villain dashboard. Now, as you can see, each of these locations, and you will select them randomly and locate them randomly. In the base game, we have 8 locations. Additional expansions add further locations for players to mix and match with. But as you can see, each of these locations has a certain amount of these slots that you're going to be placing civilians and thug tokens throughout the course of the game. And these tokens are double-sided. Depending on the side that they're found on, determines whether or not they're a civilian that you need to rescue in order to complete the rescue civilian mission, or whether they're a thug that you need to defeat in order to complete the Defeat Thug mission. Now, as you can tell, there are these indicated silhouettes here, which basically tell you that these locations are going to be pre-populated with the corresponding tokens from the very beginning of the game. So the next step in setup is to make sure that each of these spots is pre-populated with a civilian or thug according to the silhouette printed on it. All right, now that we have pre-populated all these locations where they're corresponding thugs and civilians, we're going to move on to the next step of setup, which is the threat deck or the threat card. So each villain comes with 6 of these threat cards, which are unique and specific to them. These are going to be different challenges that the hero players will be trying to overcome. And you will shuffle that deck and you will place 1 card on each of the corresponding slots in the 6 locations. We'll see that each location has this slot that has the end of turn words printed on it, not to mention a particular 1 or 2 sentence instruction on this end of turn ability. These end of turn abilities will only be available for the players once these locations are cleared from their threats. But at the beginning of the game, you're going to place 1 of these threat cards in each of these slots so that the end of turn ability will be covered. And we see that these threats, usually, quite often, they are these simple threat cards, some thematic, storyline-driven situation here. In this case, we have brainwashing, and this makes heroes in this and adjacent locations take 1 crisis token each whenever the villain lands on it. This icon here with the target symbol and the arrow indicates that this ability is triggered whenever the villain lands on this location. Now, other times, we will have henchmen. These are underlings, different minions and villains across the Marvel Universe who work for the main villain. In this case, we have Madam Hydra. And as you can see, these henchmen come with their own BAM abilities, just like the main villain has a BAM ability. Whenever that keyword is triggered from one of the master plan cards, this character will also activate as well. And they too come with health. In this case, Madam Hydra has 5 health. So we're going to place 5 health tokens on her. And this indicates that we need to deal her 5 damage before we can remove her from the game. So we're going to continue placing these threat cards here. Here is Crossbones, yet another henchman. And he has a total of 6 health. So we place the 6 health tokens there, not to mention his own BAM effect. Here we have Bob, Agent of Hydra, who only has 4 health, and he does not have a BAM effect. Instead, he just has this ability that triggers whenever a hero starts their turn in the same location as him. And finally, we have this Subversion threat card, which again has a action and ability that triggers every time the villain lands there. Now, most of the threat cards look like this, which is just some particular text that either modifies or affects the current location, or in some cases might affect the overall course of the game. In this case, each thug in this location requires 2 damage to be defeated, because otherwise thugs are very weak and they only require 1 damage to be defeated. Now, these spots here represent heroic actions that heroes are going to have to trigger. And once they place a token here, each time they trigger a heroic action, they will have to place 3 of these tokens, these heroic action tokens on there. And once these are filled, this threat would be completed. So most threats, that's what they require. With the henchmen, you're going to have to deal damage to them in order to knock them down to 0. So now we have set up the locations. We have set up the different threats and the henchmen around the table. We have populated or pre-populated the different locations with their corresponding thugs and civilians. The next step is to take the master plan deck and shuffle it and set it aside somewhere near one of the locations or the villain dashboard. Now, after that, we will randomly determine where the villain starts. So there are 6 possible locations to decide from. I usually roll a d6 to determine it. For now, we'll just place him in this spot right here, Shield Headquarters. And what happens is, wherever his starting location is, you're going to take the hero players which we have chosen a team of Hulk, Captain America, and Iron Man for this game, along with their corresponding decks of 12 cards. Each hero has 12 cards in their player deck. Now, there are some challenge modes that the game offers, so that if you want to make the game a more challenging experience, you do so by removing one or maybe even two of these cards from your deck, and therefore you'll have a smaller deck, fewer options to choose from, and you will also have less time to accomplish the missions. Now that we have selected where the main villain will start, the hero players will always start in the location opposite of that location. So that would be this right here, Avengers Tower. So they are all going to start right here. Finally, players are going to draw their opening hands. Each player starts with an opening hand of 3 cards. And now we are ready to begin the game, and the first thing that happens at the beginning of the game is the villain will take their turn. This is a game where villains and hero players will go back and forth taking turns. Luckily for the heroes will activate much more often than the villain. But the game starts with a villain turn. So the first thing we do is we draw the top card of the villain deck or the master plan deck, and we read the card from top to bottom. So this is a special card with text. Usually when you get special text like this is a very special card, a signature card, if you will, for the villain. First of all, we start from the top, and we'll see this number here in this circle with this black arrow, and that tells us how many spaces the villain moves. In this case, 0. He will not move at all. So because he does not move, he stays in the same location, but he still triggers this target symbol here, which triggers every time the villain moves or stays in this location. And here it tells us that heroes in this location and adjacent locations would take 1 crisis token. And these right here are the crisis tokens, and they're kind of like a multi-purpose token that usually different villains have different effects that are triggered by placing these on the heroes. And they're always bad. They're always detrimental, as the name would indicate. So you want to avoid them as much as possible. There are some ways of removing crisis tokens from players or from the game. And whenever you could do that, that's extremely useful. So there are no villains or there are no heroes in Red Skull's location, nor in the adjacent locations. Therefore, no hero will take a crisis token. So he is done with his movement. The next thing we would look at is for whether or not the card has a BAM. And each villain has a different configuration as to how many of his 12 master plan cards have the word BAM on it. Some villains are very BAM heavy, others not so much. Now this card does have the BAM effect. So the first thing we would do is we would look at the villain dashboard, and we would see what his BAM effect is. It says, deal 1 damage to each hero in Red Skull's location. There are no heroes in Red Skull's location, as we already pointed out, but he also has an additional effect, and increase the fear track by 2. So here we go. His fear track will advance by 2. So every time the villain here, Red Skull, has his BAM effect, it will advance the fear track by 2. Keep in mind that this fear track is particular to Red Skull. There are other villains with villainous plots and with tracks that you need to keep up with. However, they won't all be from 0 to 20. They'll vary as far as their length. They'll vary as far as how they advance. And also, many villains don't even have these tracks to begin with. So he's already at 2 out of the necessary 20 to win the game for the villains. So that's not good news. Now we're going to look around the table in clockwise order, proceeding from the villain, and see if any of the henchmen have BAM effects. And here we have Madam Hydra, deal 1 damage to each hero in this location. There are no heroes in this location. She also has a way that villains or heroes can prevent this damage, and that's by taking 1 crisis token. Now, what does damage consist of? In this game, when a hero takes damage, he is going to have to discard 1 card for every damage he or she sustains. So if the villain deals them 1 damage, they choose one of their 3 cards and they discard it, which means they're going to be weaker going forward. They are going to only have 2 cards or maybe even 1 card, depending on how much damage they've sustained. Now, there are ways through different effects from the cards and even sometimes end of turn abilities from the locations. There are ways for heroes to refill their hand size and re-strengthen themselves. However, if a hero is ever dealt damage to the full 3, let's say they have to, whether it's through one attack or multiple attacks throughout the course of several turns, if they ever sustain full damage, they will knock their piece over to indicate that they're knocked out. They will wait till their next turn to draw 3 cards. If their next turn is right after they were knocked out, that's just fine. But the point is, they will be knocked out. Usually there are consequences to being knocked out. Most typically, the consequence is for the villain to trigger another BAM effect, so that's something to watch out. If a hero is ever knocked out, he'll simply trigger his BAM effect all over again. So now we move on to the next henchman clockwise, and this is Crossbones. And he too has a BAM effect. It says deal 2 damage to each hero in this location. Again, it is preventable by taking those dreaded crisis tokens. However, there is no villain in his location. Here we see Bob, Agent of Hydra, and he does not have any BAM effects. So we went around the table, we saw all the henchmen and their potential BAM effects. Now we will move on. Once we've factored in movement and BAM effects, we look at the bottom of the card. And for your typical master plan card, what you will find on the bottom is a particular amount of civilians and thugs that will be placed. In this case, we have a special card. It has text instead. It says Hydra Insurgency. For each crisis token the heroes have, advance the fear track by 1. So you see how in this scenario, the crisis tokens piggyback with some of Red Skull's master plan cards. In this case, we have no crisis tokens so far, so this will have no effect. Now, once you've resolved the entire master plan card from top to bottom, you will place it somewhere around the player area or the gaming area, that is the 6 locations, and you will begin to form what's known as the storyline. In this game, the cards will keep on being placed next to each other, and they will represent the storyline. So whenever you read the word storyline, that is what it's referring to. So now that the villain has taken their turn, we will proceed to the heroes or the players, and we will begin with Captain America. Now, as we could see, they all start their turn in this location here with Bob, Agent of Hydra. It says heroes starting their turn in this location take 1 crisis token. So the first thing that Captain America will do is he will grab a crisis token. As I mentioned, there are ways of getting rid of this. In particular, we have the Shield headquarters location that has a end of turn ability that allows players to remove crisis tokens. However, this cannot be triggered until this threat is removed from that location. Now, the next thing a hero will do after resolving any beginning of turn triggers or abilities, the next thing they will do is they will draw the top card from their deck. So you will always have 1 additional card to choose from at the beginning of your turn. So now we have 4 because his hand size was 3. And as you can see, there are different icons printed on the bottom of these cards. And for the most part, most cards in this game are going to look like that. They're just going to have icons on the bottom. However, each hero has a few signature cards in their deck that, along with icons, might have other abilities in the form of printed text. So this right here represents the movement icon. This is how players will move around the table or around the board. This here represents the attack icon. This is how players are going to attack the different enemies. And for each attack icon that you use, you will remove 1 health token from the corresponding enemy. Now, if you are facing a thug, thugs are typically just 1 health. So any 1 fist icon would be able to defeat a thug. However, there are some modifications at times with locations that have these abilities here, where it says each thug in this location requires 2 damage to be defeated. Other than that, typically a thug only costs 1 damage to defeat. Now we also have these wild card symbols, and these wild cards have 3 colors printed on them corresponding with the 3 different actions you're going to find in this game. We also have the heroic action. I'll just zoom over here. Iron Man's card. This yellow star represents the heroic action. You can use this for one of two things. You can either use it to rescue a civilian. Each one icon will allow you to rescue one civilian. Again, there are some threat cards, not necessarily in this scenario, but in other scenarios that might alter that. And you might have to spend more heroic icons in order to rescue a civilian. But typically speaking, one rescue icon, one heroic icon can rescue one civilian. Now, these wildcard symbols indicate that you can choose each one of these symbols to represent any one of the three other icons. So in this case, this could be any two icons of your choice. And I think I'm just going to start the game with these two icons, and the hero would place their hero card. They would place it on the next slot in the storyline, and the storyline and the sequential order of it is very crucial to this game. So now Captain America can take any two actions of his choice. So I think I'm going to start by just knocking out Bob, Agent of Hydra, or at least dealing 2 damage to him. So I'll use these 2 wilds to represent 2 fists, and we will remove 2 health from Bob, Agent of Hydra. Now we'll proceed to the next player clockwise. We'll say that this is Iron Man, and Iron Man is going to start his turn just like Captain America, because Bob, Agent of Hydra is still in play. If we start our turn in their location, let me stand him back up here. If we start our turn in his location, we have to get a crisis token. Next, we're going to draw a card, the top card from Iron Man's deck. Now he has 4 cards to pick from. And I'm going to play this single star here, this heroic action. We're going to place it in the next slot in the storyline. And this is what happens. Not only will Iron Man be able to trigger his heroic action, he will be able to trigger all the printed icons on the card of the player who played before him. So in this case, Iron Man's 2 wilds, he'll have access to them as well. Now, keep in mind, they could actually spend these 3 icons or whatever icons are on the bottom in any order that they see fit. They don't necessarily have to go with Captain America's first, nor with Iron Man's first. So they can do that. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that when players have special cards that have printed text on them, those abilities will not be able to be used or copied by the following player. It's only the printed icons on the very bottom banner of the card. It looks just like this. Those are the only abilities or actions that are available to the next player as well. So we can see that Iron Man has 2 wilds and 1 heroic action. We're going to choose to use the 2 wilds first in order to deal 2 more damage to Bob, Agent of Hydra here. And we have defeated him now. Now we will set this aside somewhere, and we will take this threat token, which indicates that there's a threat here. There no longer is one. We're going to take this threat token and we're going to put it here on the clear threats mission. And if we've cleared 4 threats, we have completed this mission. Same thing with these rescue civilians or defeat thugs, which right now we're going to use this heroic action icon from Iron Man to rescue the 1 civilian that was on this location. We will place him here on this rescue civilians mission card. Once we've rescued 9 civilians, we have completed this mission. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have to complete 2 missions in order for us to win the game, because the villain is not even vulnerable to damage until you've completed a second mission. And it doesn't have to be any of these particular 2 missions. We would always remove whichever one we would complete, and we would slide them leftward. So keep that in mind. It does not have to be in any particular order. But until you complete 2 missions, even if you're on the same location with the main villain, you will not be able to deal him or her any damage. Now, once you've completed your first mission, keep in mind, the villain's going to act more often. Typically speaking, the villain acts after every 3 hero cards. So every 3 hero cards determines how often the villain will activate. However, After we've completed our first mission, you're gonna activate the villain after every 2 hero cards. So that's something to keep in mind for strategy. You might not want to complete one mission way before you're able to complete the second mission, because you're buying more time for the villain to activate on a more frequent level. So Iron Man is done with his turn. We're gonna move on to Hulk, and because we've eliminated Bob, Agent of Hydra here, he will not get a crisis token. Instead, he will start his turn, as is typical, by drawing the top card of his hero deck. And now he has 4 cards to pick from. He's going to use this arrow token because there's nothing left for him to do. By the way, I forgot to trigger Iron Man's end of turn ability. If you end your turn in a location and now there's no threat card blocking the end of turn ability, now you can activate it. It says that Iron Man can search his deck for 1 card and set it aside. So Iron Man could look at his cards here, and he's got some really good cards. But for now, we'll just take this double fist, and then he would shuffle the rest of his cards, and he would place this card that he set aside on top. So that's a way of finding a very useful card and making sure that on your next turn you will draw it. So we'll go back to Hulk over here. And as I said, I'm going to play this single heroic. No, I need to place the movement. He's going to place this movement icon here. And he will be able to use the movement icon, not to mention any icons on the previous card, which in this case is just the heroic action here. And he'll be able to move and deal or rescue a civilian, or maybe even work on a threat. So we're going to move Hulk, and you can move in either direction, clockwise or counterclockwise, an equal amount of locations as to the icons that you play down. And Hulk is going to move 1 space this way. He's going to move on to this location, and he's going to use his heroic action not to rescue a civilian, but instead he's going to grab one of these tokens, and he's going to place this token right here. And now they are 1/3 of the way from completing this particular threat. Now that the heroes have gone 3 times, it's the villain's turn yet again. And we're going to draw the top card of the Master Plan deck here. And again, we resolve it from top to bottom. This tells us that the villain does not move again. And again, every time he does not move, he will still trigger this action here. When landed on, the heroes in this and adjacent locations take 1 crisis token. Well, there are no heroes in said locations, therefore there will be no crisis tokens. Then we see whether or not there's a BAM printed on it, and there is a BAM here. So again, we will resolve Red Skull's ability, deal 1 damage to each hero in his location. There are no heroes. Also, increase the fear track by 2. So we already see that the fear track is steadily going up. Finally, we would resolve anything that's on the bottom of the card. If it was a special card, it would have text printed on it, such as this card right here. Usually on the bottom of this card, we will see icons that tell us the different amount of thugs and civilians that need to be added to the board. In this case, there is nothing on the bottom, so there's no additional thing to resolve. But we are going to look at the Master Plan card here, just to give you guys an idea of what I'm referring to. So you see here on the bottom, if Red Skull were to have moved, he would have moved 4 spaces. So let's just simulate that. 1, 2, 3, and 4. He would deal his BAM effect to any villain or any hero in the same location. So he would have dealt 1 damage to Hulk, which means Hulk would have chosen one of his cards here to discard. So let's just say we get rid of that heroic icon there. And then we would look at all other characters, all other henchmen, and we would resolve 1 by 1 their individual BAM effects in clockwise order following the villain. And once we've resolved all of those, we would look at the bottom of the card here, and we would see that we had to add thugs. Sometimes we have to add civilians. Sometimes we have to add a combination of both. In this case, we're only adding thugs, and we would resolve it in clockwise order. So first of all, this center location here with the target and arrow icon that we pointed out earlier, this refers to the location where the villain actually lands on. So where the villain lands on, he's going to have 2 thugs. The location before it in clockwise order would have 1 thug, and the location after it in clockwise order would have 1 thug. And we would add those thugs and or civilians in clockwise order. So first we would go from the location before the spot he landed on. This location takes 1 thug. Then we would add 2 thugs to the location he actually landed on. And guess what? There is only room for 1 of the 2 thugs. Therefore, we will not be able to place a second. And we're going to take a break here to resolve the villain's overflow effect. As I mentioned, every villain has an overflow effect. This is a consequence, a casualty for the heroes not being able to clear the boards. So here it tells us that if a thug or a civilian token cannot be added to a location, we would increase the fear track by 1 for each token you couldn't add. So in this case, we had to add 2. We were not able to add the second one, so we will advance the fear track by 1. Now, sometimes the overflow effects are individual in this sense for each individual token that could not be added. In other cases, the overflow effects are overall. It doesn't matter whether it was 1, 2, or 3 that could not be added. You will just pay 1 penalty, and you're going to have to read the overflow effects of each villain carefully to make sure that you're resolving them correctly. Now that we resolved Red Skull's current location, we find the next location in clockwise order only takes 1 additional thug, and there is room for that 1 thug. So that's how you would resolve a master plan card that looks like this. Now, heroes are going to continue taking their actions, and they're going to continue using their move icons to move, their heroic icons to rescue civilians and take care of threat. They're going to continue to use their fist icons to deal damage, their wild icons to do anything of their choice, until they complete missions 1 by 1. Once they complete the first mission, as I mentioned, instead of the villain taking their turn after every 3 hero cards, the villain's going to speed up and they're going to start taking their turn after every 2 hero cards. Then, once the heroes have completed the second mission, now they will be able to deal damage to the villain. Now, if they want to, they could complete a 3rd mission. It's not necessary, but it will allow all the players, each hero, to draw 1 additional card. So that's a great way to refresh your hand if you're weak. It's also a great way to give you additional options if you're strong. So again, keep that in mind. There is a reward for completing the 3rd mission. However, it's not absolutely necessary. Now, as I mentioned, many villains have their villainous plots, which are an alternative way for them to win the game. However, typically speaking, a game can end and the players would lose if at any point it is the villain's turn and there are no master plan cards in the villain's deck to be played, then the villain would win the game. Also, if at any point in the game the hero has their turn and they have no cards in their hand, nor any cards in their hero deck to draw from, then the players have lost the game. So keep that in mind. The respective decks serve as ticking time bombs for the heroes to get things done. So keep it in mind, it's only during your turn that having no cards will end the game for the players. And that's pretty much it as far as how you play Marvel United. Thank you so much for joining us here at When Harry Met Board Games. Please comment down below if you have any other questions or concerns. This is Harry saying take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have fun gaming. Bye-bye.